There's something in our bones, something ancient and unshaken, that draws us toward the mysteries beyond our understanding. For as long as humans have walked this earth, we've looked to the skies, to the unseen, to the moments that defy explanation, searching for traces of the divine. Whether carved into the walls of forgotten temples or whispered in the oral traditions of distant cultures, these stories of wonder and awe have shaped civilizations, sparked wars, and inspired art, science, and faith. Today, we're stepping into that timeless current, the river of miracles, visions, and encounters that have left even the most skeptical minds questioning what lies beyond the edges of our reality. Imagine standing at the foot of a crumbling pyramid, its stones whispering secrets from 1,000 years ago, or walking the path where a lone shepherd once claimed to witness the heavens open, bathing the hillside in unearthly light. These aren't just legends, they're threads in a vast tapestry of human experience, where history, faith, and the unexplained collide. From the sudden appearances of celestial beings to artifacts that seem to defy the laws of nature, the stories we're about to explore aren't just relics of the past. They're mirrors held up to our deepest questions. Are we alone? Is there something or someone greater moving just beyond our sight? This journey isn't about forcing belief or dismissing doubt. It's about marveling at the moments that have stopped nations in their tracks, the phenomena that science still struggles to explain, and the personal accounts that defy simple skepticism. Over the next 35 stories, we'll traverse continents and centuries, from the deserts where prophets heard voices on the wind to the modern-day sightings that still leave investigators baffled. Some tales will chill you, others will lift you, but all of them will remind you of the enduring human fascination with the divine. So come with an open mind, and perhaps by the end, you'll find yourself questioning where the line between history and mystery truly lies. The unknown is calling. Let's answer. The sun beat down mercilessly on the rocky slopes of Mount Horeb, a place so barren even the hardiest desert shrubs clung to life by a thread. It was here, in this unforgiving wilderness, that one of history's most enduring divine encounters unfolded, a moment so vivid, so inexplicable, it would echo across millennia. A shepherd named Moses, exiled and adrift, stumbled upon a sight that defied nature itself, a bush engulfed in flames yet never turning to ash. The ancient texts describe it as more than fire, a presence, a voice speaking from the blaze, calling him by name. But what was this burning bush? Centuries of debate have swirled around this very question. Some scholars point to the volcanic landscapes of the Sinai Peninsula, where pockets of natural gas could ignite spontaneously, creating the illusion of an eternal flame. Others argue for the dictamnus plant, a rare desert shrub that secretes volatile oils brush against it on a scorching day, and the air around it can briefly erupt in a ghostly glow. Yet neither explanation fully captures the heart of the story. How could gas or a plant explain the voice, the mission, the unshakable conviction that transformed a fugitive into a deliverer? The desert keeps its secrets. Modern archaeology has traced possible routes of the Exodus, pinpointing locations like Jabal Makla, a mountain in Saudi Arabia some believe to be the true Sinai. Its slopes bear scars of ancient fires, and nearby, a solitary acacia tree stands strangely resistant to flame. Locals claim coincidence, symbol, or something far older, far deeper, woven into the land itself. Perhaps the power of this story lies not in proving or disproving, but in what it reveals about the human spirit. A bush that burns but isn't consumed, it's a metaphor that resonates beyond religion. The idea that some truth, some callings are unextinguishable. Whether divine intervention or a natural phenomenon imbued with sacred meaning, this moment on the mountainside reminds us that wonder still lingers at the edges of the explainable, waiting to set a soul alight. The story of the Red Sea parting is etched into human history, not just as a religious account, but as one of those rare moments where faith, geology, and ancient records collide in ways that still spark debate today. Picture this: an entire nation fleeing the chariots of Pharaoh, trapped between an army and what the Bible describes as a wall of water. Then, in an instant, the impossible happens. The sea divides, dry land appears, and the Israelites cross to safety just before the waters crash down on their pursuers. It's a scene so dramatic, even Hollywood can't resist retelling it. But could there be more to this story than divine intervention alone? Scientists have long wrestled with this question, and one compelling theory comes from oceanography. Researchers studying wind patterns and coastal geography in the eastern Nile Delta have proposed something called a wind setdown, a rare but natural phenomenon where sustained, hurricane-force winds can push shallow waters aside, temporarily exposing the seabed. Computer models show that a sustained wind of around 60 miles per hour blowing eastward for nearly 12 hours could have created a land bridge in certain areas where the Red Sea narrows. Ancient maps even suggest the crossing might not have been the deep, open waters we imagine today, but a marshy region known as the Red Sea, a mistranslation that stuck over centuries. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. While Egyptian records avoid documenting defeats, pharaohs weren't in the habit of chiseling their failures into temple walls. There's a curious artifact called the Ipuwer papyrus. Dating to roughly the same era as the Exodus, this ancient text describes a time of chaos in Egypt, rivers turning to blood, plagues, and even the sudden death of a pharaoh's son. Some scholars argue these could be echoes of the biblical plagues, though others dismiss it as poetic metaphor. And then there's the ruins of Avaris, a city linked to the Hyksos, a Semitic people who abruptly left Egypt around the same time the Israelites supposedly fled. Coincidence or fragments of a story reshaped by time? What's undeniable is how this event transcends archaeology. Whether divine miracle or natural phenomenon amplified by faith, the parting of the Red Sea speaks to something universal, the hope that when all seems lost, a path can appear where none existed before. For the Israelites, it wasn't just about crossing a body of water, it was about stepping into a new identity. And perhaps that's why, thousands of years later, we're still drawn to this story. It's not just about proving or disproving, but recognizing how certain moments, real or remembered, can change the course of history and the human heart. Deep in the heart of Jerusalem, beneath layers of history and legend, lies one of antiquity's greatest riddles: the vanishing of the Ark of the Covenant. This golden chest, said to hold the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments and the very presence of the divine, was the centerpiece of Solomon's temple, a relic so powerful that ancient texts claim it could level mountains and strike down armies. Yet by the 6th century before the Common Era, it had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a mystery that has obsessed kings, knights, and treasure hunters for millennia. The last recorded sighting of the Ark places it in Solomon's temple, but when Babylonian forces sacked Jerusalem in 586 BCE, the artifact was conspicuously absent from their loot. Jewish tradition offers one tantalizing clue. The prophet Jeremiah, foreseeing the invasion, is said to have hidden the Ark in a cave on Mount Nebo, the same mountain where Moses glimpsed the Promised Land. But another theory, woven into the fabric of Ethiopian Christianity, tells a far more dramatic tale. The Kebra Nagast, Ethiopia's sacred text, claims the Ark was spirited away to Axum by Menelik, the son of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, where it remains to this day under guard in the chapel of the tablet. Pilgrims flock there, believing the Ark's presence sanctifies the land, though no outsider has ever been allowed to verify its existence. Then there's the shadowy trail of the Knights Templar. After the Crusaders captured Jerusalem in 1099, these warrior monks reportedly excavated beneath the Temple Mount, seeking holy relics. Some historians argue they found the Ark and smuggled it to Europe, possibly to the French village of Rennes-le-Château, where rumors of buried treasure have swirled for centuries. Modern radar scans beneath the village church have revealed cryptic chambers, but nothing conclusive. Meanwhile, back in Jerusalem, archaeologists have mapped a labyrinth of tunnels beneath the Temple Mount, some leading to sealed-off chambers that could conceal the Ark, though political tensions make excavation nearly impossible. What's striking isn't just the diversity of theories, but what they reveal about us. The Ark isn't merely a lost object. It's a mirror reflecting humanity's longing for connection to the sacred. Whether it rests in an Ethiopian chapel, a French crypt, or the depths of Jerusalem, its legend endures because it represents the ultimate unanswered question. Can the divine truly be contained, or does it always slip just beyond our grasp? On October 13, 1917, a crowd of 70,000 people stood in a muddy field near Fátima, Portugal, their eyes fixed on the sky. Many had come to witness a prophecy. 3 young shepherd children claimed the Virgin Mary had promised a miracle that day. What happened next would become one of the most widely attested supernatural events in modern history. Witnesses described the sun breaking through storm clouds, not as a celestial body, but as a spinning, multicolored disk that plunged toward the earth before zigzagging back into the sky. Farmers miles away reported the same phenomenon, their soaked clothes drying instantly as if touched by invisible fire. Even atheist journalists sent to debunk the event left questioning their skepticism. But how do we explain the so-called miracle of the sun? Meteorologists point out that no observatory recorded solar anomalies that day, yet the sheer volume of eyewitness accounts from scientists to skeptics makes dismissal difficult. Some researchers propose a rare atmospheric refraction event, where ice crystals in the clouds could have bent sunlight into kaleidoscopic patterns. Others argue for mass suggestion. The crowd, primed by months of anticipation, might have collectively interpreted natural weather phenomena through a lens of fervent belief. Yet this theory stumbles when confronted with accounts from non-believers like Avelino de Almeida, a Lisbon newspaper editor who arrived mocking the spectacle but later wrote of seeing the sun tremble with sudden bursts of light. The Vatican, after decades of investigation, declared the apparitions worthy of belief in 1930, though carefully avoiding definitive claims about the sun's behavior. Intriguingly, declassified documents reveal that Portuguese authorities briefly monitored the children, fearing their visions might spark unrest. Meanwhile, modern psychologists note the parallels between the Fátima events and other mass visionary experiences, like the 20,000 who reported seeing the Virgin in Zaytown, Egypt in 1968, despite no official church endorsement there. Perhaps the most haunting detail lies in the prophecies allegedly shared during the apparitions, including warnings of war and societal collapse. Skeptics argue these were vague enough to fit later events like World War II, but devotees see eerie precision. Whatever the truth, Fátima endures as a mirror to humanity's deepest tensions between faith and reason, coincidence and destiny. In a world increasingly ruled by data, the question lingers: when thousands share the same impossible memory, does it matter whether the sun truly danced or only that they believed it did? The Shroud of Turin lies at the crossroads of faith and forensic science, a single linen cloth bearing the faint, haunting imprint of a crucified man, his wounds mirroring the biblical account of Christ's suffering. For centuries, this relic has sparked fierce debate. Is it a medieval forgery, an elaborate hoax, or could it truly be the burial shroud of Jesus? The answers, like the image itself, seem to shift depending on the light. In 1988, radiocarbon dating tests conducted by 3 independent laboratories sent shockwaves through the religious and scientific communities. Samples from the shroud were dated to between 1260 and 1390, squarely placing its origin in the Middle Ages, the era of relic forgery. Skeptics declared the case closed, but almost immediately questions arose. Critics pointed out that tested samples might have been contaminated by repairs made after a fire in the 1500s, or even by microbial growth woven into the fibers over centuries. Later studies of the shroud's unique weave noted its herringbone pattern matched textiles from 1st century Judea, not medieval Europe. Then came the forensic evidence. Bloodstain analysis revealed traces of human hemoglobin with abnormal properties, high levels of bilirubin, consistent with severe trauma. The wounds align eerily with Roman crucifixion methods, lacerations from a flagrum whip, a puncture near the wrist, not the palm, as often depicted, and even evidence of a crown of thorns. Pollen grains extracted from the cloth tell another story. Some originate from plants native to Jerusalem, including the rare Gundelia tournefortii, a thorny plant that grows near the Dead Sea. How would a medieval forger have known to include such geographically specific details? Believers argue the shroud's image itself defies replication. No painting or dye explains the three-dimensional, superficial nature of the imprint. It's more like a photographic negative than a pigment, a characteristic only discovered after the invention of photography. Some scientists propose a burst of radiant energy, perhaps from a resurrection event, could have caused the discoloration. Skeptics counter with demonstrations of how rubbing a bas-relief with acid-soaked cloth can produce similar effects. Yet the shroud's mystery deepens when you consider its history. The Knights Templar, accused of heresy in the 14th century, allegedly venerated a mysterious headcloth depicting Christ's face. Could it have been the shroud? And why does the face on the shroud bear uncanny similarities to the veil of Veronica, another legendary relic? Whether divine artifact or medieval masterpiece, the shroud forces us to confront the limits of both science and faith. After all, how do you date a miracle or disprove one? The ancient Hindu epic Mahabharata reads like a cosmic battleground where gods and mortals wielded weapons of terrifying power, so advanced, so destructive, they seem ripped from the pages of a modern science fiction novel. Among these were the celestial astras, divine armaments capable of leveling entire cities with blasts of radiant energy and leaving the land poisoned for generations. One passage describes arrows that unleashed smokeless fire, reducing armies to ashes while survivors succumbed to a sickness that made their hair and nails fall out. Another details a weapon called the Brahmastra, whose detonation darkened the sky, boiled rivers, and left the earth barren. To modern ears, these accounts sound eerily familiar, not as mythology, but as eyewitness reports of nuclear warfare. This startling parallel takes on new weight when we examine the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, one of the great cities of the Indus Valley civilization. Archaeologists excavating the site in the 1920s found skeletons scattered in streets as if struck by sudden catastrophe, some still clutching hands or frozen mid-task. Stranger still, these bones showed radiation levels 50 times higher than normal, and the city's bricks bore signs of vitrification, a glass-like fusion that occurs only under extreme heat like that of a nuclear blast. Mainstream scholarship attributes this to natural phenomena, perhaps a catastrophic fire, but alternative researchers point to the Mahabharata's descriptions as potential evidence of an ancient technological disaster. Traditionalists argue these texts are purely allegorical, symbolizing spiritual warfare. Yet the precision of certain details is hard to dismiss. The epic mentions weapons that could only be used once, lest they burn the world, echoing the moral dilemmas of modern nuclear deterrence. Another passage warns of wind weapons that could strip flesh from bone, reminiscent of neutron bomb effects. Even the timing raises questions. The Mahabharata's war is traditionally dated to around 3000 BCE, coinciding with the abrupt decline of the Indus Valley cities. Could these civilizations have possessed and tragically misused knowledge far beyond what we assume? Skeptics counter that humans project contemporary fears onto ancient texts, seeing atomic metaphors where none exist. They note that Vedic scholars interpret these passages as yogic powers or psychic phenomena, not literal technology, but the debate itself reveals something profound. Whether divine intervention, lost science, or symbolic wisdom, these stories force us to grapple with humanity's oldest and most enduring question. What happens when the line between the sacred and the destructive blurs? Across millennia, the answer remains written in the ashes of Mohenjo-Daro and the verses of the Mahabharata, waiting to be deciphered anew. High atop the slopes of Mount Parnassus, where the air hummed with the scent of laurel and incense, the Oracle of Delphi sat perched above a fissure in the earth, a crack in reality itself, some believed. For over 1,000 years, kings and peasants alike ascended the sacred way to seek her counsel, her words whispered in a voice not quite her own. The Pythia, as she was known, would enter a trance so profound that ancient historians described her writhing like a serpent, her utterances cryptic, her prophecies terrifyingly precise. But what fueled these visions? Modern science has peeled back the veil, revealing a startling truth. The very ground beneath Delphi may have been her co-conspirator. Geologists discovered that two fault lines intersect directly beneath the temple, seeping ethylene gas, a sweet-smelling vapor known to induce euphoria, disjointed speech, and even hallucinations in low doses. In controlled experiments, exposure to ethylene produces symptoms eerily similar to those described in ancient texts: limbs trembling, eyes rolling back, a sense of detachment from the body. The temple's architects might have unknowingly amplified these effects by placing the Pythia's chamber directly over the fissure, her tripod seat allowing the gases to rise around her as she chewed laurel leaves, long believed to have mild psychoactive properties. It's a potent cocktail, nature and ritual conspiring to create the illusion of divine possession. Yet the gas alone doesn't explain the oracle's chilling accuracy. Take the Lydian king Croesus, who asked if he should wage war on Persia. The Pythia's reply: "If you cross the river Halys, a great empire will fall." Confident in his might, Croesus attacked only to watch his own kingdom crumble. The prophecy was flawless in its ambiguity, a lesson in the oracle's genius for weaving truths that revealed themselves only in hindsight. Then there was her warning to Athens before the Persian Wars: "The wooden walls alone shall not fall." Some interpreted this as a call to fortify the Acropolis, but the statesman Themistocles saw deeper meaning. The walls were their ships. His naval strategy at Salamis saved Greece. Skeptics argue these successes were cherry-picked from a mountain of vague pronouncements, but the sheer volume of recorded hits is hard to dismiss. Even Alexander the Great, a man who reshaped the world, paused his conquests to consult Delphi. When the Pythia initially refused him, declaring it an unlucky day, he dragged her from the temple by her hair until she gasped, "You are invincible, my son," a phrase he took as divine sanction for his campaigns. Was this manipulation, or did the gas-clouded mind of the Pythia occasionally pierce the veil of time? Perhaps the most haunting legacy of Delphi lies in its decline. As seismic activity shifted and the ethylene fissures closed, the prophecies grew muddled. By the Roman era, the oracle was a shadow of her former self, her words reduced to political theater. The final recorded prophecy, a declaration to Emperor Julian that the gods would no longer speak there. Within months, Julian was dead, and Christianity's rise sealed Delphi's fate. Fittingly, the last whisper of the oracle was both a curse and a confession. The divine, if it ever spoke here at all, had fallen silent. And so we're left with a question that lingers like temple smoke: were these prophecies the voice of the earth, the gods, or something far more human, the power of belief itself? The summer of 1518 in Strasbourg was not one of revelry but of sheer terror. It began with a single woman, Frau Trophia, stepping into the street one stifling July afternoon and beginning to dance. Not the measured steps of a festival, but a frenzied, jerking motion, her body moving as if pulled by invisible strings. Within days, dozens joined her, their limbs thrashing uncontrollably under the sweltering sun. By month's end, nearly 400 people were caught in the grip of this inexplicable mania, dancing until their feet bled, some collapsing from exhaustion or even dying where they fell. Authorities, desperate for answers, turned to the explanations of their time: divine punishment, demonic possession, or an imbalance of the humors. They ordered more dancing, believing the afflicted needed to dance it out, a decision that only fueled the nightmare. Modern science offers chilling alternatives. One leading theory points to ergot poisoning, a mold that grows on damp rye and contains lysergic acid, the precursor to LSD. When ingested, it can cause convulsions, hallucinations, and a sensation of burning limbs, symptoms that might explain the compulsion to move. Grain records from that year show rainy conditions ideal for ergot, and Strasbourg's poor, who relied on rye bread, would have been most vulnerable. But skeptics note that ergotism usually causes gangrene or seizures, not coordinated group dancing. Another possibility is mass psychogenic illness, a psychological contagion where extreme stress, like the famine and disease plaguing pre-Reformation Europe, triggers collective hysterical reactions. Similar outbreaks dot history: the Tanganyika laughter epidemic of 1962, or the medieval tarantella dances said to cure spider bites. Yet the Strasbourg event stands apart in its scale and brutality. Eyewitness accounts describe musicians being hired to accompany the dancers, as if the right melody might break the spell, only for the tempo to whip the crowd into greater frenzy. Some victims reportedly screamed for help mid-dance, their faces twisted in agony, their bodies no longer their own. The epidemic lasted 2 months before vanishing as suddenly as it began, leaving behind a mystery that straddles the line between biology and belief. What makes the dancing plague so haunting isn't just the lack of definitive answers, but what it reveals about the power of the mind and the world it constructs. Whether triggered by toxins, trauma, or something beyond our current understanding, those summer weeks in Strasbourg remind us that reality is far more fragile than we assume. When the body becomes a puppet and the world a stage, who or what holds the strings? Deep in the heart of Death Valley, where the heat shimmers like a living thing and the ground cracks with thirst, lies a place called Racetrack Playa, a dry lakebed so flat, so eerily still, it feels like walking on the surface of another planet. But the real mystery isn't the emptiness, it's what moves across it. Scattered along the cracked clay are hundreds of rocks, some as small as a fist, others weighing hundreds of pounds, each trailing long, meandering grooves behind them as if they'd wandered the playa on their own. For decades, these sailing stones defied explanation. No one had ever seen them move, yet the evidence was undeniable. Something was dragging them across the desert floor. The indigenous Timbisha Shoshone, who have called this land home for generations, long spoke of spirits walking among the stones. Early settlers, baffled by the trails, spun tales of magnetic forces or pranksters working under cover of darkness. Scientists, stumped for years, proposed everything from dust devils to rogue gusts of wind. But the truth, when it finally came, was stranger than fiction and required a perfect storm of conditions so rare, it's no wonder no one had witnessed it before. The breakthrough came in 2013 when researchers armed with time-lapse cameras and GPS sensors caught the phenomenon in action. On winter nights when rare rainstorms flooded the playa, a thin layer of water would freeze into vast sheet-like panes of ice. As morning sun warmed the ice, it fractured into floating islands that, pushed by gentle winds, crept across the shallow water, nudging the rocks ahead of them. The stones, some perched on ice rafts, others half submerged, slid at speeds barely perceptible to the human eye, leaving those signature trails in the soft mud below. Mystery solved, right? Not quite, because here's where it gets weird. Some rocks moved in pairs, their trails perfectly parallel until one suddenly pivoted as if changing its mind. Others left zigzagging paths that defied the prevailing wind direction. And then there's the case of the Grand Champion, a 700-pound boulder that trekked over 1,500 feet in a single season, outpacing rocks a fraction of its size. Ice sheets explain much, but not everything. Why do some stones stay stubbornly still while others embark on epic journeys? Why do their paths sometimes spiral or loop like drunken dancers? Perhaps the most haunting detail is how fleeting these movements are. The player's surface records each journey like a fossil, preserving trails that may have taken decades to form. Yet the actual sliding happens in bursts of activity so brief, so perfectly timed that for centuries humans simply missed it. It's a reminder that some of nature's greatest magic happens just beyond the edges of our perception, in the spaces between breaths, in the quiet hours when no one is watching. The stones of Racetrack Playa may have given up their biggest secret, but like all good mysteries, they've kept a few whispers for themselves. In the quiet adobe-lined streets of Taos, New Mexico, a strange symphony plays, but only for a select few. Since the early 1990s, residents have reported an unsettling phenomenon known as the Taos hum, a persistent, low-frequency drone like a distant engine idling that vibrates through their bones yet remains inaudible to most. Surveys suggest roughly 2% of the local population can hear it, a percentage small enough to breed skepticism, yet consistent enough to defy dismissal. Some describe it as a muffled growl just below hearing, others as a pressure in their skulls that disrupts sleep and focus. What's chilling isn't just the sound itself, but its elusiveness. Microphones fail to capture it. Scientists arrive with equipment only to leave baffled. So what's haunting these desert nights? Geologists point to the Rio Grande Rift, a massive tectonic gash running beneath the region. In other parts of the world, similar hums have been traced to seismic activity, subterranean vibrations resonating through bedrock, amplified by unique atmospheric conditions. Taos sits atop a geologic crossroads where underground water tables shift and ancient faults simmer. Could the hum be the earth itself, groaning like an old house settling? Skeptics counter that seismic hums are typically recorded by instruments, not just human ears. Yet there's another twist. Certain individuals, particularly those with heightened low-frequency hearing, might detect these subtle tremors while others remain oblivious. Then there's the brain's role. Neurologists propose that the hum could be a form of phantom sound, akin to tinnitus, an internal misfire where the auditory system generates noise without external stimulus. But why would this cluster in Taos? Studies show that some sufferers stop hearing the hum when they leave the area, suggesting an environmental trigger. Others argue it's a product of the nocebo effect, where awareness of the legend primes people to imagine the sound. But this doesn't explain the original, consistent reports from those who'd never heard of the phenomenon before experiencing it firsthand. The most provocative theories venture into covert territory. Just 30 miles northwest lies the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, home to the ultra-secretive Dulce Base, a location UFO enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists claim houses underground military experiments. Declassified Cold War documents reveal projects like Acoustic Kitty, where the CIA attempted to weaponize sound. Could the hum be collateral from classified technology, a byproduct of infrasound weapons or subterranean drilling? The military neither confirms nor denies, fueling speculation. Even mainstream science acknowledges that infrasound, though inaudible to most, can induce anxiety, vertigo, and even visions at certain frequencies. What binds these theories together is the hum's refusal to conform. Unlike ghost stories or UFO sightings, it's neither flashy nor cinematic. It's a quiet disturbance, a whisper at the edge of perception that asks us to question the boundaries of our senses. Whether tectonic, neurological, or man-made, the Taos hum lingers like a riddle without an answer, a reminder that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only pondered in the stillness of a desert night. From above, the Nazca Desert looks like a vast canvas scratched with secrets, giant spiders, hummingbirds with wingspans rivaling jetliners, geometric spirals stretching for miles. Etched into the Peruvian plains over 2,000 years ago, these lines remain one of archaeology's most tantalizing enigmas. How did an ancient people, without the benefit of flight, design such precise, massive artworks meant to be seen only from the sky? And more perplexing still, why one theory points to the stars. Researchers mapping the lines discovered startling alignments with celestial events. The famous spider glyph mirrors the constellation Orion, while other shapes align with solstice sunrises or the cyclical appearances of certain stars. Some scholars propose the Nazca used these markers as a colossal astronomical calendar, tracking seasons for agriculture or timing religious ceremonies. But critics argue the alignments aren't consistent enough. Why would a culture reliant on oral tradition need such permanent, sprawling sky maps? Why risk misalignment over centuries as stars gradually shift? Then there's the boldest hypothesis, ancient balloon technology. In the 1970s, researchers Jim Woodman and Julian Knott theorized the Nazca could have constructed hot air balloons from local materials, cotton fabrics woven tightly enough to hold air, fires fueled by llama dung. They even built a replica using only period-appropriate tools, proving it was possible to achieve brief, controlled flights. Skeptics dismiss this as speculative, asking why no balloon artifacts or depictions survive in Nazca art. But proponents counter that organic materials would have decayed long ago, and the Nazca's intricate textiles, some strong enough to stop arrows, hint at advanced knowledge of fibers. Indigenous oral traditions offer a different lens. The Nazca's descendants, the Quechua, speak of the Viracocha, sky beings who descended to teach humanity arts and sciences. Some glyphs, like the trapezoidal landing strips, eerily resemble modern runways. Could these lines have been ritual pathways meant to guide celestial visitors back to the heavens? Or were they prayers carved into the earth, visible only to the gods above? Modern technology has deepened the mystery. Satellite imagery reveals thousands more lines and shapes previously unnoticed, including humanoid figures wielding unknown objects. Soil studies show the Nazca deliberately removed the desert's iron-rich surface layer, exposing lighter subsoil to create contrast, a technique that preserved the lines for millennia. Yet the most haunting detail isn't how they were made, but how they've endured. In a region battered by winds and flash floods, the glyphs remain crisp, as if shielded by some unseen hand. Perhaps the truth lies in the interplay of all these theories, the Nazca as astronomers, engineers, and visionaries, crafting a landscape where science and spirit converged. Their lines aren't just art or navigation aids, but a bridge between earth and sky, a language written too large for mortals to read. Standing among them, one feels the weight of their purpose, to remind us that some messages aren't meant to be understood, only witnessed. The story of the Holy Grail begins not in a Christian chapel, but in the misty forests of ancient Britain, where Celtic myths spoke of magical cauldrons that could restore life and grant boundless wisdom. These vessels, like the legendary cauldron of Dagda, weren't just kitchen tools, they were symbols of the otherworld's power, capable of reviving dead warriors or prophesying the future. When Christianity spread across Europe, these pagan motifs didn't vanish, they transformed. The cauldron's curved silhouette became the chalice's sacred cup, its mystical properties reimagined as the vessel that caught Christ's blood at the crucifixion. By the 12th century, poets like Chrétien de Troyes wove these threads into Arthurian legends, introducing the Graal as a radiant dish carried by a maiden, its origins still shrouded in mystery. But it was Robert de Boron's Joseph d'Arimathie that cemented the Grail's Christian identity, merging it with Joseph of Arimathea's story, the disciple who, according to law, used the cup from the Last Supper to collect Jesus' wounds at the cross. Suddenly, the Grail wasn't just a relic, it was a divine covenant, hidden away until only the purest knight Percival or Galahad could find it. This version gripped medieval Europe, inspiring quests both literary and literal. Monasteries from Glastonbury to Genoa claimed to possess the Grail, their artifacts ranging from simple wooden bowls to jewel-encrusted goblets. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the Grail's allure took a darker turn. Adolf Hitler, obsessed with occult symbolism, sent teams across Europe to seize artifacts he believed held supernatural power, including the Grail. Heinrich Himmler's Onanab, a Nazi research group, scoured Spanish monasteries and French cathedrals, convinced the cup could grant invincibility. Some speculate their hunt led them to the Valencia chalice, a carved agate cup displayed in Spain since the 15th century. Archaeologists note its lower half dates to the Levant around the 1st century, plausible for a Holy Land artifact, but the gold and gemstone embellishments were added centuries later. Then there's the Antioch cup, discovered in early 1900s Syria and once hailed as the Grail itself. Its intricate outer shell depicts Christ and his disciples, but scholars soon realized it was a 6th century liturgical vessel, not the Last Supper's cup. Still, the blur between devotion and discovery raises a provocative question. Does the Grail's power lie in its historical authenticity, or in the centuries of hope and madness it's inspired? From Monty Python to Indiana Jones, the Grail endures not as an object to be found, but as a mirror to humanity's endless yearning for redemption, for transcendence, for a taste of the divine. In the small Italian town of Lanciano, nestled among the rolling hills of Abruzzo, a moment of doubt became one of Catholicism's most enduring miracles, and a mystery that modern science still struggles to explain. The year was 750, and according to tradition, a Basilian monk celebrating Mass found himself wrestling with a crisis of faith. As he raised the host during consecration, the bread in his hands transformed before the entire congregation. Where there had been unleavened wheat, there now lay a circle of fleshy tissue, dark and glistening. The wine in the chalice, too, had changed, clotted into 5 globules of crimson substance, irregular in size but perfectly preserved. The stunned monk declared it a sign from God, and the townspeople enshrined the relics in the church of St. Legontian, where they remain displayed to this day. Centuries passed, and the miracle of Lanciano might have faded into legend were it not for a team of scientists in the 1970s. With permission from the Vatican, Professor Odoardo Linoli, a renowned anatomist and pathologist, subjected the relics to rigorous testing. His findings, published in the journal Quaderni Sclavo di Diagnostica Clinica e di Laboratory, sent shockwaves through both religious and scientific communities. The bread was indeed human cardiac tissue, specifically the muscular wall of the heart's left ventricle, complete with intricate arterial branches. Even more astonishing, the tissue showed no signs of artificial preservation, yet it had resisted decay for over 1,200 years. The wine globules, analyzed under microscope, matched human blood of type AB, a rare group found in less than 5% of the global population. Strikingly, AB is also the blood type most frequently associated with Eucharistic miracles, including the Shroud of Turin. Skeptics proposed theories perhaps medieval monks substituted animal tissue, or the samples somehow became contaminated over time. But Linoli's team found no traces of preservatives like formaldehyde, nor evidence of decomposition. The tissue contained intact proteins and minerals in proportions found only in living hearts, not mummified or treated specimens. Even the blood globules defied explanation. When dissolved in saline solution, they behaved exactly like fresh blood, with hemoglobin and white blood cells still discernible. The miracle's deeper resonance, however, lies in its timing. The 8th century was an era of fierce theological debate over the nature of the Eucharist, whether the bread and wine merely symbolized Christ's body and blood or became them in substance. Lanciano's transformation appeared as if answering that question in visceral terms. Today, pilgrims still flock to the church, where the relics rest in a monstrance of gilded silver, their edges darkened by centuries of candle smoke, but their essence, like the mystery they represent, strangely untouched by time. Science can describe what happened in Lanciano, but not how. And perhaps that's the point. Some wonders exist not to be solved, but to remind us that the boundary between faith and fact is far more porous than we dare to believe. June 30th, 1908 began like any other summer morning in the remote Siberian taiga, until the sky split open. At 7:17 a.m., nomadic reindeer herders near the Podkaymaya Tunguska River looked up to see a fireball streaking across the heavens, brighter than a second sun. Moments later, a shockwave flattened 80 million trees across 800 square miles, their trunks radiating outward like matchsticks in a perfect butterfly-shaped pattern. Windows shattered 400 miles away. Seismographs in England detected tremors. Nights across Europe glowed eerily for weeks. Londoners reported being able to read newspapers outdoors at midnight by the strange luminescence. This was the Tunguska event, the largest cosmic impact in recorded history, and a mystery that still fuels debate over a century later. Eyewitnesses described the celestial visitor in chilling detail. The Evenki people, indigenous to the region, spoke of Ogdi, their god of thunder, riding his fiery sleigh across the sky before striking the earth in punishment. One hunter recalled feeling his face burn like needles as the blast's heat wave swept over him, knocking him unconscious. Another, 60 miles from ground zero, described the explosion throwing him from his porch as his entire hut collapsed. But what exactly caused this devastation? The absence of a crater only deepened the enigma. Scientists first pinned the blame on a comet, a loosely packed ball of ice and dust that might have disintegrated 5 miles above the surface, releasing energy equivalent to nearly 200 Hiroshima bombs. Computer models suggest such an airburst could explain the radial tree fall and lack of impact scars. But mystery lingers in the soil. Expeditions to the site found microscopic silicate and magnetite spheres embedded in the earth, materials common in meteorites, yet no sizable fragments were ever recovered. This absence fuels wilder theories. Some physicists propose an antimatter object annihilating itself upon contact with Earth's atmosphere, a hypothesis that gained traction when researchers discovered elevated levels of radioactive isotopes in tree rings from 1908. Others speculate about a rogue microscopic black hole passing through the planet, a notion dismissed by most experts but one that persists in fringe circles. Then there's Nikola Tesla's discarded experiment, rumors that his Wardenclyffe Tower may have accidentally harnessed atmospheric energy, unleashing it over Siberia. Perhaps most compelling is the Evenki perspective, often overshadowed by Western science. Their oral traditions describe Ogdi's rage as cyclical, a celestial reckoning that purifies the land. Modern researchers note that the blast zone's unique ecology supports this. The scorched earth gave way to accelerated forest regeneration, with new growth emerging in fractal patterns. Whether cosmic collision or divine intervention, Tunguska's legacy endures as a humbling reminder of our planet's vulnerability to forces beyond our control, and the stories we tell to make sense of the unfathomable. A wooden statue of the Virgin Mary stood unassuming in a convent in Akita, Japan, until one summer day in 1973 when nuns noticed something impossible. Beads of liquid, thick like human sweat, trickled from the statue's right hand. Then came the tears streaming down its face in rivulets, sometimes several times a day for years. Samples sent to laboratories revealed the fluid was human tears type AB blood, the same rare group found in other Eucharistic miracles, but this was no isolated case. Across the globe, from a humble home in Syracuse, New York, to a dusty shrine in Argentina, statues of saints and the Virgin have reportedly wept, bled, or oozed oils, leaving scientists and skeptics scrambling for explanations. Forensic analyses of these phenomena reveal a spectrum of possibilities, some chilling, others disappointingly mundane. In Sardinia, a weeping Madonna was exposed as a clever hoax when police discovered hidden tubes and water pumps inside the statue. But other cases defy easy dismissal. At the Syracuse home in 1953, a plaster Madonna shed tears for 4 days straight, witnessed by thousands, including doctors who collected samples. The liquid was identical to human tears, yet the statue showed no signs of tampering. Even more baffling are instances where statues exude oils with no known source. A 13th century icon in Chicago's St. Nicholas Albanian Orthodox Church began leaking fragrant myrrh in 1997, drenching worshippers who touched it. Chemists couldn't replicate the substance's molecular structure or explain its sudden appearance. Material science offers partial answers. Certain porous materials, like wood or plaster, can absorb and later release liquids due to humidity shifts, a process called deliquescence. Temperature changes might cause condensation inside hollow statues, mimicking tears, but these theories stumble when confronted with secretions like blood or oil, which require active biological or chemical processes. Some researchers point to microbial activity. Certain bacteria produce reddish pigments that could resemble blood, yet no known organism synthesizes human hemoglobin or the complex proteins found in samples from sites like Akita. Then there's the psychological dimension. In Lourdes and Fátima, crowd dynamics amplified individual visions into mass phenomena. Could collective expectation coax the brain into perceiving moisture where none exists? Studies show that under heightened emotion, the mind can distort sensory input, but this doesn't account for verifiable physical evidence left behind. Perhaps the most haunting detail is the recurring symbolism. Many weeping statues occur during times of crisis, war, natural disasters, or societal upheaval. The Akita statue's caretaker, Sister Agnes Sasagawa, reported visions warning of global chastisement, echoing prophecies at Fátima. Whether divine sign or subconscious mirror, these phenomena tap into a deep human need to see the sacred breach the mundane, to witness grief or hope made tangible. In the end, the statue's greatest mystery may not be how they weep, but why we so desperately want to believe they do. From the hushed halls of Vatican investigations to the makeshift altars of private homes, the weeping statue's phenomenon forces a confrontation between faith and forensics. Some cases crumble under scrutiny, while others stand like the statues themselves, silent, enigmatic, and stubbornly resistant to explanation. They remind us that even in an age of microscopes and mass spectrometry, some boundaries between miracle and molecule, between the seen and the unseen, remain provocatively blurred. Deep in the vaults of Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book Library lies an object that has defied comprehension for over 6 centuries, a book unlike any other. Known as the Voynich manuscript, this 240-page enigma is written in an unknown script, its pages filled with bizarre illustrations of plants that don't resemble any earthly flora, celestial charts of unfamiliar constellations, and nude women bathing in intricate green tubs connected by what appear to be glowing tubes. Carbon dated to the early 15th century, the manuscript has resisted every attempt at decipherment, from Renaissance cryptographers to modern supercomputers. Its very existence feels like a taunt, a puzzle left behind by history, daring us to solve it. The text itself is a labyrinth, written left to right with no obvious punctuation. Its characters flow in a rhythmic but inscrutable pattern. Statistical analysis reveals linguistic structures similar to known languages: word repetition, sentence length, yet no consistent translation emerges. Some researchers argue it's an elaborate hoax, perhaps concocted by 16th-century bookseller Wilfrid Voynich himself, who brought the manuscript to public attention in 1912. But this theory stumbles when confronted with the book's age. The vellum, ink, and pigments all match early 15th-century materials, and marginal notes in medieval Latin suggest it passed through the hands of Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, a known collector of occult curiosities. Then there are the illustrations, the true heart of the mystery. Herbal sections depict plants with bulbous roots, spiraling stems, and leaves that seem to pulse off the page. their forms neither medicinal nor mythological. Astrological diagrams show zodiac symbols nested inside concentric circles, surrounded by tiny, naked figures riding comet-like streaks. Most haunting are the biological sections, women with swollen bellies submerged in emerald green liquid, their bodies connected by a network of vessels resembling modern anatomical diagrams, except these were drawn 300 years before the invention of the microscope. Recent breakthroughs have only deepened the intrigue. In 2019, a team of Canadian researchers employed artificial intelligence to analyze the manuscript's linguistic patterns, training algorithms on hundreds of languages. The AI suggested the text might be encoded Hebrew, with words systematically shuffled, a cipher technique used by medieval alchemists to conceal secrets. But when applied to the manuscript, the results were fragmented at best, yielding phrases like farmer's light and empty sacrifice with no coherent narrative. Another theory points to the manuscript's possible origin in northern Italy, where Cathar heretics fleeing persecution might have encrypted their beliefs in an unreadable format. Alchemical traditions offer another lens. The green baths could represent the solve et coagula process, the dissolution and reconstitution of matter central to Hermetic philosophy. The unearthly plants might symbolize the vegetable stone, a theoretical substance alchemists believed could grow like a living organism. Even the script's curling, root-like strokes echo the language of the birds, a mythical tongue said to hold the keys to transformation. But perhaps the Voynich manuscript's greatest power lies in its refusal to be solved. In an age where algorithms decode ancient scripts and satellites map forgotten cities, this humble book remains stubbornly silent. It whispers of a time when knowledge was dangerous, when secrets were written in codes meant to endure. Whether herbal treatise, alien artifact, or an elaborate joke, the manuscript challenges our faith in progress itself, a reminder that some doors, no matter how hard we knock, may never open. The crypt beneath the chapel of Saint Bernadette in Nevers, France, holds a sight that defies both time and science. Over 140 years after her death, the body of Bernadette Soubirous, the young visionary of Lourdes, lies encased in glass, her skin still smooth and porcelain-like, her hands clasped around a rusting rosary. No embalming fluids were used, no artificial preservation techniques applied. Yet when exhumed 3 decades after her passing, church examiners found her not only intact but exuding a faint floral scent. This phenomenon isn't isolated. Across the world, from the mountain monasteries of Lebanon to the catacombs of Palermo, certain saints' bodies resist decay in ways that challenge our understanding of biology. Take Saint Charbel Makhlouf, a Maronite monk whose tomb in Anoia, Lebanon, became a site of wonder mere months after his burial in 1898. Villagers reported a strange glow emanating from his grave. When authorities exhumed him, they found his corpse floating in mud, perfectly preserved despite the damp environment. More astonishing still, his joints remained supple, able to bend as if he were merely sleeping. Over the next century, his body would inexplicably secrete a mixture of blood and oil, a phenomenon documented by doctors and analyzed in laboratories. Samples revealed no bacterial or fungal activity, yet the fluid continued to flow, drenching the linen shrouds placed around him. Science offers partial explanations. Some cases align with natural mummification, arid climates, burial in lime-rich soil, or the absence of bacteria due to prolonged fasting before death. Saint Bernadette, for instance, was interred in a dry, sealed crypt, conditions conducive to desiccation. But this doesn't account for the flexibility observed in figures like Saint Charbel or the lack of odor typically associated with decomposition. Forensic pathologists note that adipose tissue can sometimes saponify, turning into a wax-like substance called adiposa, which slows decay. Yet even this process fails to explain reports of sweet fragrances described as roses or honey that often accompany these bodies with no known chemical source. The Church approaches these cases with caution, subjecting them to rigorous scrutiny before declaring them incorruptible. In the 16th century, Saint Cecilia's intact body was discovered with a gash on her neck, matching accounts of her martyrdom by sword. Modern examiners confirmed the wound's authenticity, but even such forensic validation leaves questions unanswered. Why do some saints' bodies endure while others, buried in identical conditions, return to dust? Why do a select few, like Saint Rita of Cassia, remain flexible centuries later, their skin still warm to the touch? Perhaps the most haunting detail lies in what these phenomena evoke beyond science. In Orthodox traditions, incorruptibility is seen as a sign of theoses, a body transfigured by divine grace. The sweet odors often noted during times of prayer or crisis are called the odor of sanctity, a fragrance believed to signal heavenly intercession. Even skeptics admit these accounts carry psychological power. In a world terrified of mortality, the idea that flesh might defy decay taps into our deepest hopes that death isn't an end but a threshold. Whether viewed as miracles or biological anomalies, the incorruptibles stand as silent witnesses to history's unresolved mysteries. They challenge us to stand at the intersection of faith and forensics, where the only certainty is that some truths refuse to be buried. In a dusty corner of the National Museum of Iraq sits an unassuming clay jar just 5 inches tall, sealed with asphalt and capping a copper cylinder that cradles an iron rod. Discovered in 1936 near Baghdad, this 2,000-year-old artifact might seem like a simple storage vessel until you realize what it can do. Fill it with vinegar or grape juice, and the acidic liquid acts as an electrolyte, creating a potential difference between the copper and iron. In other words, it becomes a battery capable of producing just over 1 volt of electricity, a fact that rewrites the history of technology as we know it. Known as the Baghdad battery, this Parthian-era relic predates Alessandro Volta's invention of the modern battery by nearly 2 millennia. But here's the puzzle. If ancient Mesopotamians harnessed electricity, what exactly did they use it for? One compelling theory points to electroplating, the process of coating one metal with another using an electric current. Artifacts from the same period, like gilded silver vessels found in nearby Seleucia, show traces of workmanship that align with early electroplating techniques. Replicas of the Baghdad battery have successfully deposited thin layers of gold onto silver, suggesting these jars could have been the power source behind Parthia's dazzling metallurgy. Yet the ritualistic backdrop of the era complicates the picture. The Parthians worshipped Mithra, a solar deity associated with light and divine fire. Some scholars argue the batteries might have served a sacred function, powering small shocks during temple ceremonies to simulate divine contact. Imagine a priest gripping the iron rod while the copper cylinder hummed with charge, creating a tingling sensation interpreted as Mithra's touch. Similar practices appear in other ancient cultures. The Egyptians used electric catfish to numb devotees in healing rituals, while Greek physicians applied live torpedo rays to treat pain. Could the Baghdad battery have been a tool of spiritual theater, its faint current mistaken for supernatural energy? Skeptics propose simpler explanations. The jar might have been a storage container for sacred scrolls, its metal components merely preventing moisture damage. Others note that no wires or connectors have been found alongside these artifacts, making sustained electrical use unlikely. But counterarguments highlight organic materials like hemp or silk that could have served as conductive links, long since decayed. The absence of written records compounds the mystery. Unlike their Roman contemporaries, the Parthians left few technical manuals. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue lies in replication. German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, who first studied the battery, noted that stacking multiple cells could generate significant voltage. In 1978, scientist Dr. Arne Egebrecht connected several reconstructed jars in series, achieving enough power to electroplate a small statue. This raises a provocative question. If one battery was found, how many others were lost to time? Were these devices rare experiments or part of a broader, forgotten tradition of ancient electrical engineering? The Baghdad battery defies easy categorization. It's a scientific anomaly wrapped in a spiritual enigma, a reminder that the past often refuses to fit neatly into our modern frameworks. Whether practical tool or sacred object, its existence whispers of a time when the line between technology and magic was as thin as the layer of gold it might have helped apply. And that, in itself, is its own kind of spark. The retreat from Mons in August 1914 was supposed to be a military disaster, a chaotic scramble of exhausted British troops outnumbered and outgunned by the advancing German forces. But what happened in the fog of that retreat became legend. Soldiers began reporting visions straight out of medieval tapestry, winged archers descending from the sky, their bows gleaming as they loosed arrows of light into the enemy ranks. Some described a spectral St. George leading a host of longbowmen, their ethereal forms silhouetted against the smoke of battle. The accounts were so vivid, so consistent among disparate units, that newspapers soon dubbed it the miracle of Mons, divine intervention in the darkest hour of the Great War. But history's lens offers alternate explanations. Psychiatrists studying combat stress note that extreme fatigue and trauma can trigger shared hallucinations, a phenomenon known as combat mirage. The mind, pushed beyond its limits, reaches for familiar imagery, especially in a generation raised on stories of Agincourt and celestial protectors. The fact that many reports emerged weeks after the battle, retold in letters and trenches, suggests possible embellishment, yet some details resist easy dismissal. A German prisoner of war allegedly asked his captors, "Where were your horsemen in shining armor?" A question that implies the enemy saw something unexplained on the field. The cultural backdrop adds another layer. Just 3 months before Mons, author Arthur Machen published The Bowmen, a short story in which ghostly English archers from Agincourt save modern soldiers. When soldiers' accounts began circulating, Machen insisted his fiction had inspired the legend. But here's where it twists. His story wasn't published until after the battle. Could his tale have tapped into an existing collective vision, or did the chaos of war blur the line between rumor and reality? Perhaps the most compelling angle isn't proving or debunking, but understanding why this particular myth took root. The Angel of Mons emerged precisely when Britain needed it, a nation unprepared for the horrors of industrialized warfare, grasping for signs they weren't abandoned. Whether psychological coping mechanism, supernatural event, or the fog of war refracting a story into history, the legend endures because it speaks to a universal truth. In the face of unimaginable darkness, the human spirit will conjure light, even if it must paint it across the sky with arrows. On a rocky hillside in Bosnia-Herzegovina, where the scars of war still mar the landscape, a group of children claimed to encounter a woman bathed in golden light, a figure they described as the Virgin Mary. It was June 24, 1981, and the village of Medjugorje was about to become a global pilgrimage site. Over 4 decades later, the apparitions allegedly continue, drawing millions who report inexplicable phenomena. Rosaries turning to gold in their hands, the sun spinning like a fiery disk before plunging toward the earth, and incurable diseases vanishing after encounters with what believers call Gospa, the Croatian term for Our Lady. At the heart of the phenomenon are the solar miracles, events where the sun appears to pulse, split into kaleidoscopic colors, or dart across the sky. Pilgrims describe feeling its heat vanish, replaced by a cool radiance that leaves no sunburns even after hours of gazing. Skeptics attribute these visions to optical effects. Prolonged staring at the sun can cause temporary retinal damage, distorting perception. Yet stories persist of cameras capturing the same anomalies, like one 1985 photograph showing the sun eclipsed by a dark cross, its rays bending unnaturally. Doctors have documented cases of blindness risk from solar gazing, yet Medjugorje archives also hold sworn testimonies from ophthalmologists who witnessed the phenomena without eye protection and suffered no harm. The Vatican's stance has been cautious, even skeptical. While Pope Francis acknowledged Medjugorje's spiritual significance in 2019, the Church has never officially recognized the apparitions as supernatural, citing inconsistencies in the visionaries' accounts and concerns over commercialization. Investigators note the original seers, now adults, still receive daily messages, a break from historical precedents like Lourdes or Fátima, where apparitions ceased after a definitive revelation. Critics highlight financial motives. The village, once impoverished, now thrives on religious tourism, with hotels and souvenir shops lining the route to Apparition Hill. But for pilgrims, the weight of personal experience overshadows institutional doubt. Take the case of Diana Basile, an Italian woman healed of multiple sclerosis in 1984 after a visit. Medical records confirmed her diagnosis and subsequent recovery, with neurologists unable to explain the sudden reversal. Similar accounts fill the notebooks of Franciscan priests who have ministered here for decades, diabetics abandoning insulin, tumors disappearing overnight, even a child born without pupils reportedly gaining sight after praying at the site. Scientific scrutiny of these claims varies. Some cases lack documentation, while others, like Basile's, were examined by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. What makes Medjugorje unique is its living, evolving nature. Unlike static miracles of the past, the visions allegedly continue, with the seers claiming to receive monthly or annual prophecies, a 10th secret yet to be revealed. Satellite imagery has even captured unexplained light anomalies over Apparition Hill, though experts debate whether these are lens flares or something more elusive. The village itself seems suspended between eras. Teenagers snap selfies beside centuries-old crucifixes, while elderly nuns kneel on stones worn smooth by decades of prayer. Perhaps the most compelling question isn't whether the sun truly danced, but why these phenomena resonate so deeply in our technological age. In a world ruled by data, Medjugorje offers something primal, a space where the boundaries between the material and the mystical blur. Whether divine intervention, mass psychogenic event, or a complex interplay of both, the story of this Bosnian village challenges us to confront the limits of what we deem possible. After all, when millions across cultures and generations share the same awe under the same patch of sky, does it matter if the miracle lies in the heavens or in the human heart? At the heart of India's Lepakshi temple, a marvel of 16th century Vijayanagara architecture, one pillar stands, or rather, doesn't, defying every law of physics. Known as the hanging pillar, this massive stone column appears to float a hair's breadth above the temple floor, with enough space to slide a thin cloth beneath its base. Visitors gather to test the gap themselves, passing scarves and papers underneath as proof. But the real mystery isn't just its suspension. It's the question of how or why ancient builders engineered such a feat without the precision tools of modern construction. Local lore claims the pillar was deliberately designed this way to showcase the artisan's divine skill, a flex of spiritual and architectural mastery. Others whisper that vibrating it even slightly produces a resonant hum, suggesting it might have functioned as part of a larger acoustic system, amplifying chants or rituals. The temple's ceiling, after all, is a masterpiece of vibration-sensitive design. Carvings of musical instruments supposedly emit faint tones when struck by sunlight at certain angles. Could the pillar be part of an ancient harmonic network, its suspension minimizing contact to preserve sound purity? Modern engineers have studied similar vibration-dampening techniques in earthquake-resistant structures, where gaps or flexible materials absorb seismic energy. The Vijayanagara Empire, no stranger to innovation, may have stumbled upon this principle centuries early. Then there's the legend of British colonial engineers. During the 19th century, intrigued by the pillar's defiance of gravity, a team reportedly attempted to displace it, hoping to uncover its secrets. According to temple caretakers, their efforts triggered a small collapse in the surrounding structure, forcing them to abandon the project, almost as if the pillar's placement was somehow integral to the temple's stability. No official records confirm the incident, but the story persists, a cautionary tale about meddling with the ancients' work. Geologists offer a more grounded theory. The pillar may have settled over time due to subtle shifts in the temple's foundation, creating the illusion of intentional suspension. Yet even this explanation falters when confronted with the precision of its carvings, intricate depictions of dancers and deities that show no signs of stress or misalignment. The pillar's shadow at noon forms a perfect circle, suggesting its placement was astronomically calibrated, not accidental. Whether sacred artistry or forgotten science, the hanging pillar challenges our assumptions about the past. It's a reminder that history's greatest innovations often wear the guise of miracles, until someone, centuries later, rediscovers the lost wisdom behind them. And sometimes, even then, the stones refuse to give up all their secrets. In the early 19th century, on the sun-scorched island of Barbados, a family vault became the stage for one of history's most unsettling mysteries. The Chase Vault, a modest limestone crypt built into the cliffs of Christchurch Parish, held the remains of the island's elite until the coffins inside began moving on their own. The first disturbance was discovered in 1818, when pallbearers arrived to inter the body of 2-year-old Charles Brewster Ames. As the heavy slab door groaned open, they froze. The lead-lined coffins of Thomasina Goddard and infant Marian Chase, previously laid neatly side by side, were now strewn about the chamber as if tossed by invisible hands. Thomasina's coffin, the heaviest, lay upright against the far wall. Over the next decade, the vault was reopened 4 more times for the burials of Dorcas Chase, Thomas Chase, and finally Samuel Brewster, and each visit revealed fresh chaos. Coffins lay stacked in pyramids, some flipped onto their sides, others wedged into corners with unnatural force. Governor Lord Commermere, witnessing the final disruption in 1819, ordered the crypt sealed with cement and sand sprinkled across the floor as a telltale for tampering. When broken open weeks later, the sand lay undisturbed, but the coffins had rearranged themselves once more. The vault was emptied in desperation, the bodies relocated to unmarked graves, and the mystery left unresolved. Rational explanations abound. Geologists point to Barbados's location atop a network of limestone caves where subtle seismic shifts could theoretically nudge heavy objects. Others argue for sugar fermentation gases building pressure in the airtight vault, though this fails to explain the coffin's precise repositioning. Skeptics whisper of grave robbers, yet the sealed entrance and untouched sand defy this. Even the weight of the coffins complicates matters. Thomas Chase's, filled with mercury to preserve his body, would have required multiple grown men to lift. Supernatural theories, meanwhile, weave tales of restless spirits. Dorcas Chase, rumored to have starved herself to escape her tyrannical father Thomas Chase, is often cast as the culprit, her spirit rejecting his presence even in death. Folklore speaks of coffin walks, a Caribbean belief that the unquiet dead rearrange their resting places to protest burial near those who wronged them. The island's enslaved population, familiar with the Chase family's cruelty, may have seen the disturbances as cosmic justice. Modern parapsychologists propose poltergeist activity, citing the emotional volatility surrounding the Chase family's tragic history. But perhaps the most haunting detail is the vault's silence afterward. Once emptied, it stood undisturbed for decades, its walls bearing no marks, its floor no grooves from dragging. Whatever force moved those coffins left no trace of its method, only the chilling certainty that, for a brief moment in history, the laws of gravity and logic were not what they seemed. In the quiet Spanish town of Calanda, the night of March 29, 1640, should have been like any other except for one impossible event that would echo through history. 22-year-old Miguel Juan Pellicer, a farmer who had lost his right leg 2 years prior in a grinding mill accident, went to bed as usual, his wooden prosthetic leaning against the wall. By dawn, his family awoke to screams not of pain but of disbelief. Where the stump of his amputated limb had been, an entirely new leg now stretched beneath the sheets, warm to the touch and bearing the same scar from a childhood injury. The miracle defied every law of nature, and what followed wasn't just local gossip, but one of the most meticulously documented supernatural events in history. Medical records from the time confirm the amputation was real. Surgeons in Zaragoza had sawed through Pellicer's leg 4 fingers below the knee, cauterizing the wound with boiling oil, standard practice in an era before antibiotics. For years afterward, he begged at the door of the Basilica del Pilar, rubbing his stump with oil from the church's lamps. The night before the miracle, witnesses reported seeing a strange glow in his family's home. By morning, even the skeptical local physician, Dr. Juan Lorenzo Garcia, attested to the leg's authenticity, noting it matched Pellicer's left limb perfectly, down to a distinctive mole. The skin showed no signs of surgery, the muscles responded naturally, and within days, Pellicer was walking without a limp, something impossible with 17th-century prosthetics. The Vatican's response was unprecedented. A formal investigation spanned 3 centuries, involving sworn testimonies from over 24 witnesses, including nobles, doctors, and priests. Forensic experts examined the documentation as late as the 1950s, verifying ink and paper authenticity. The church even cross-referenced whether reports rain that night had turned Calanda's streets to mud, yet Pellicer's freshly regenerated foot bore no dirt when he emerged at dawn. By 1940, Pope Pius Roman XII officially declared the event a miracle, citing the lack of scientific explanation and the sheer weight of evidence. Modern perspectives offer little clarity. Some researchers propose psychosomatic triggers. Could profound faith have stimulated tissue regeneration, a phenomenon observed in rare cases of spontaneous remission? Others note parallels between Pellicer's story and the regenerative abilities of certain amphibians, hinting at dormant human potentials unlocked by extreme circumstances. Skeptics argue for mass hallucination or fraud, but this ignores the paper trail, notarized documents, physician notes, even the mill's employment records confirming Pellicer's injury. The Basilica del Pilar still displays the ancient prosthetic, its worn surface a silent challenge to those who dismiss the event outright. Perhaps the most haunting detail lies in the timing. Pellicer's miracle occurred on the eve of the Feast of the Annunciation, a day symbolizing divine intervention in the mundane. Whether seen as heavenly mercy or a glimpse into biology's uncharted depths, the miracle of Calanda endures not as a relic of blind faith, but as a testament to history's stubborn refusal to fit neatly into our boxes of understanding. Some doors, once opened, cannot be shut no matter how hard we try. High on the desolate slopes of Mount Baigong in China's remote Qinghai province, a collection of rust-colored iron pipes juts from the rocks like the bones of some ancient machine. Embedded in the walls of a crumbling triangular pyramid and stretching into a nearby saltwater lake, these strange tubular structures have been dated by some researchers to a staggering 150,000 years old, a time when Homo sapiens were just beginning their migration out of Africa. The pipes vary in size from mere straw-width filaments to massive 16-inch diameters, their arrangement too precise, too geometric to dismiss as random natural formations. But if they're not natural, who or what could have placed them here millennia before the dawn of recorded civilization? Geologists offer a prosaic explanation: limonite concretions. Under rare conditions, mineral-rich groundwater can seep into fissures, depositing iron oxides that harden into pipe-like structures over millennia. Similar formations exist worldwide, like Utah's Pipestone or the famed Devil's Tower. Yet locals whisper of something far stranger. The nomadic Tuvans who have roamed this region for centuries call the mountain the place where the gods forged metal, their folklore describing sky chariots that once mined the earth. Modern tests complicate the picture. Samples sent to Beijing's smelting plant revealed an unusual composition. 8% of the pipe material couldn't be identified, its properties unlike any known iron alloy. Even more baffling, some pipes extend deep into the lakebed, their ends clogged with a silicate residue that resembles slag, a waste product from high-temperature smelting. Ancient astronaut theorists pounce on such details. The pyramid itself, they argue, aligns with celestial markers, its 3 triangular entrances mirroring the layout of certain Orion belt stars. Satellite imagery reveals grid-like patterns in the surrounding terrain, suggesting buried infrastructure. Could this be the remnants of a prehistoric industrial complex built by visitors from the stars? Skeptics counter that the pyramid is likely a heavily eroded natural formation, its symmetry exaggerated by pareidolia. As for the pipes, they note that radioisotope dating remains contentious. Some tests suggest a far younger age, overlapping with China's Bronze Age. But here's where the mystery tightens. In 2002, a team from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences discovered tree rings in the pipe material. Except these rings pulsed with uniform radioactivity, unlike any known dendrochronological pattern. Stranger still, nearby caves contain half-melted metallic fragments and carvings of beings with elongated skulls, their tools resembling cylinders eerily similar to the pipes. Whether geological oddity or extraterrestrial handiwork, the Beigong pipes force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Our planet's history may be far longer and far stranger than we've been taught. The wind howling through these hollow tubes sounds almost like a question one we're not yet equipped to answer. Every year, on the eve of Orthodox Easter, a hushed crowd packs into Jerusalem's Church of the Holy Sepulchre, their faces lit by flickering candlelight. They've come for the ceremony of the Holy Fire, a tradition dating back at least to the 9th century, a moment when, believers say, divine flames spontaneously ignite within the tomb of Christ. As the patriarch kneels in prayer inside the edicule, the small chapel marking Jesus' burial site, witnesses describe streaks of blue fire leaping from the stone slab where his body once lay. The flames, they claim, don't burn skin or fabric for the first 33 minutes, a number echoing Christ's earthly lifespan. Within hours, the fire is passed from candle to candle across continents, carried by special flights to Orthodox communities worldwide. Scientists proposing natural explanations focus on the chemistry of the ancient church itself. The tomb's enclosed space, lined with limestone and marble, could trap gases like phosphine or methane, byproducts of decomposing organic matter in the crypts below. When mixed with air, these gases ignite at low temperatures, producing ethereal blue flames. Some researchers point to the patriarch's oil-anointed hands. Certain sacred oils contain white phosphorus, which combusts upon contact with oxygen. Yet skeptics struggle to explain why the flames consistently appear only after specific prayers, or how pilgrims reliably report the fire's initial coolness, a phenomenon documented in medieval travelogues and modern smartphone videos alike. The ceremony's critics highlight its tightly controlled access. Only the Greek Orthodox patriarch enters the edicule, and the room is searched beforehand for hidden devices. But in 2008, an Armenian deacon leaked footage showing what he claimed was a concealed lighter, a charge the Orthodox Church vehemently denies. Others argue that even if the fire were staged, its endurance as a symbol is its true miracle. For centuries, the holy fire has united warring Christian factions in Jerusalem. On this one day, Armenian, Coptic, and Syriac clergy set aside disputes to receive the flame together, a fleeting truce in a city defined by division. Perhaps the most compelling evidence lies in the burn tests. Multiple accounts describe pilgrims plunging their hands into the initial flames without injury. In 1834, Russian traveler Alexander Azaryevich recorded witnessing this phenomenon, and similar claims persist today. Modern physicists suggest the fire might ionize the air, creating a brief plasma layer that insulates skin from heat, a phenomenon observed in lab conditions but never replicated at this scale. Whether divine manifestation or sacred chemistry, the holy fire's power transcends physics. It's a living tether between the first Easter and the present, a flare ignited not just in stone but in the collective memory of millions. In a world hungry for tangible miracles, this flickering blue light asks a question that smolders long after the candles burn down. What does it mean to believe when the line between the mystical and the molecular blurs beyond recognition? The night of February 8, 1855, draped Devon, England, in an unbroken sheet of snow, a silent world where even the slightest disturbance would leave its mark. Yet what villagers discovered at dawn was no ordinary disturbance. Stretching for over 100 miles from the Ixie estuary to the rural hamlet of Topsham, a trail of hoofprints wound its way across rooftops, through walled gardens and over frozen rivers. Each mark measured roughly 4 inches long, pressed deep into the snow as if bearing supernatural weight, the tracks spaced precisely 8 inches apart in a single, unerring line. Witnesses swore the prints bore the unmistakable shape of cloven hooves, sparking a panic that the devil himself had stalked the countryside. Newspapers dubbed it the Devil's Walk, and pulpits thundered with warnings of impending doom. Scientific minds scrambled for rational explanations. Reverend Musgrave, a local clergyman with an interest in natural philosophy, theorized the marks belonged to a vagrant kangaroo escaped from a private menagerie. Yet no such animal was reported missing, and the prints lacked the telltale drag of a marsupial's tail. Others proposed badgers or otters, but the sheer scale of the trail, crossing obstacles no earthly creature could navigate, defied zoological logic. Then came the most enduring theory: experimental balloons. In the mid-19th century, meteorological devices often trailed chains or grappling hooks to stabilize flight. Could a wayward balloon, its metal appendages snapping frozen ground like hooves, have carved this bizarre path? The experiments of physicist Dr. Ebenezer Smith in 1856 lent credence to the idea. Using a weighted balloon, he replicated similar impressions in fresh snow, but critics noted the Devon prints showed organic flexibility, curving around obstacles as if guided by intelligence. Even stranger, some tracks appeared to vanish midway up haystacks or the sides of barns, only to resume on the opposite side. Balloon chains couldn't explain that. Folklore offers a darker lens. Devon's coastal villages whispered of ancient legends: the Ostara huntsman, a spectral figure said to ride winter winds on cloven feet. The timing, just weeks before the pagan festival of Imbolc, fueled speculation of lingering pre-Christian beliefs resurfacing. Yet the most chilling account comes from a farmhand near Dawlish, who swore he'd followed the tracks into a copse of trees, only to find them ending abruptly at the base of an oak with no footprints leading away. Today, the Devil's footprints remain a masterclass in the collision of fact and fear. They remind us that even in an age of reason, the unknown wears many guises, sometimes as a balloon's accidental artistry, sometimes as hoof prints marching relentlessly toward our doorsteps. Whether prank, phenomenon, or something far older, the truth, like those tracks, lingers just beyond our grasp. Cairo's dusty streets were no stranger to miracles, but nothing could have prepared the working-class neighborhood of Zaytown for what began on April 2, 1968. At precisely 8:45 p.m., 2 Muslim mechanics at a garage across from St. Mary's Coptic Church looked up to see a woman in glowing white standing motionless atop the church's central dome. At first, they assumed it was a nun contemplating suicide until the figure raised her hands in blessing, and a shower of light burst around her like dissolving stars. Within hours, crowds gathered, their cries drawing police who arrived expecting a riot. Instead, they joined the dumbstruck masses, watching as the apparition floated between domes, sometimes holding an olive branch, other times accompanied by luminous doves that swooped through the air without flapping their wings. By dawn, photos and newsreels captured the phenomenon, launching what would become 3 years of nightly visitations witnessed by an estimated 250,000 people, including Egypt's president, cabinet ministers, and even skeptical Soviet journalists. The sheer volume of eyewitness testimony sets Setdown apart from typical Marian apparitions. Unlike secluded rural sightings, these events unfolded in a densely packed urban center, with crowds sometimes exceeding 10,000. Police logs from the era detail officers' confusion as they radioed headquarters about an unidentified luminous body, defying all logic. Government photographers captured the light forms on film, their developing rooms revealing streaks of silver where the naked eye had seen a distinct feminine figure. Most striking were the consistent descriptions across religious lines. Coptic Christians, Sunni Muslims, and foreign atheists all reported the same details: the serene face, the blue and white robes, the silent movements that defied wind and gravity. Even Egypt's state-controlled press, initially hostile to the claims, ran front-page headlines after their own reporters witnessed the phenomenon. Science struggled to explain the events. UFO researchers proposed atmospheric plasma discharges, a theory undermined by the apparition's humanoid specificity and prolonged duration. Some sightings lasted hours. Skeptics suggested mass hysteria, but this failed to account for independent observers who'd stumbled upon the phenomenon unaware of its reputation. Then there were the physical traces. Branches from trees near the church reportedly sprouted fragrant oils unknown to local botanists, while medical teams documented healings among the sick who'd touched the apparition's footprints, glowing patches on the church's limestone that vanished by sunrise. The Coptic Church, typically reserved about supernatural claims, quietly endorsed the events after Patriarch Kyrillos VI allegedly received a private vision foretelling the apparitions. Yet the Vatican never officially recognized Setdown, leaving it in a curious limbo, a miracle too public to ignore, too ecumenical to fully claim. Today, the church's domes still bear witness, their curves lit by ordinary floodlights. But those who stood there in the 60s swear no earthly light could mimic what they saw, a presence that hovered not just above the church, but between worlds, dissolving the lines between faith and fact like mist in a sudden, unearthly dawn. Among the shattered statues and corroded coins recovered from the Antikythera shipwreck in 1901, one lump of bronze stood apart, green with age, its surface etched with faint, precise markings. At first, archaeologists dismissed it as part of an ancient navigational tool. Then, nearly 50 years later, a curious historian noticed something extraordinary: intricate gear teeth peeking through the encrusted layers. This wasn't just another artifact, it was the Antikythera mechanism, a 2,000-year-old device so advanced it rewrote our understanding of ancient technology. X-ray imaging revealed a labyrinth of interlocking bronze gears, some with as many as 223 teeth, arranged to simulate the movements of the Sun, Moon, and 5 known planets. The front dial displayed the Greek zodiac and Egyptian calendar, while smaller dials predicted solar eclipses with eerie accuracy, even accounting for the Moon's irregular orbit. But here's what truly stunned researchers: the mechanism incorporated a differential gear, a component previously believed to have been invented in the 16th century. This wasn't just a clockwork model of the cosmos, it was a mathematical masterpiece capable of calculating celestial events decades in advance. The craftsmanship points to a genius mind, and many scholars suspect the hand of Archimedes himself. Ancient texts describe the Sicilian inventor building a celestial globe so precise it showed the motions of the heavens, a device allegedly plundered by Roman general Marcellus during the sack of Syracuse in 212 BCE. Could the Antikythera mechanism be a descendant of that lost marvel? The shipwreck's location en route from Rhodes to Rome fuels this theory. Rhodes was home to Hipparchus, the astronomer who first mapped the moon's wobbling orbit, a feature the mechanism replicates with unsettling precision. Yet the greatest mystery isn't how it worked, but why such technology vanished for over a millennium. Some argue the mechanisms were rare, reserved for elite scholars or temple priests, their knowledge lost when libraries like Alexandria burned. Others point to Rome's pragmatic engineering culture, which favored aqueducts over abstract cosmology. But perhaps the most haunting possibility is that devices like these weren't unique at all, that the Antikythera mechanism is the sole survivor of a broader tradition, its siblings melted down for scrap or still hidden in undiscovered wrecks. Modern reconstructions prove the device wasn't just theoretical. It functioned flawlessly, its gears singing the music of the spheres as they turned. Holding one today, you're struck by an unsettling thought. If the ancients could build this, what else did they know? And why did the world have to wait 1,500 years to rediscover it? The Antikythera mechanism isn't just a relic, it's a whisper from a road not taken, a glimpse of an ancient scientific revolution that flickered out too soon. The morning mist clung to the hills of Tepeyac in December 1531 as Juan Diego, a humble Aztec convert, hurried toward Mass. What happened next would transform not just his life, but the spiritual landscape of an entire continent. According to tradition, the Virgin Mary appeared before him, speaking in his native Nahuatl and instructing him to request a church be built on that sacred ground. When the skeptical bishop demanded proof, Juan Diego returned to the hillside where the Virgin caused Castilian roses foreign to Mexico and out of season, to bloom miraculously in the frozen soil. Gathering them in his tilma, a coarse cactus fiber cloak, he rushed back to the bishop. As he unfolded his cloak, the roses tumbled out, revealing something far more astonishing. The fabric now bore a radiant image of the Virgin herself, her hands folded in prayer, her mantle spangled with stars. What makes this image extraordinary isn't just its sudden appearance, but its defiance of natural decay. Woven from I-8 fiber, a fragile material derived from Megi plants, the tilma should have disintegrated within 20 years. Yet nearly 5 centuries later, it remains intact, displayed in Mexico City's Basilica of Guadalupe. Its colors miraculously unfaded despite exposure to candle smoke, humidity, and even a nitric acid spill in 1785 that failed to damage the image. Scientific examinations have only deepened the enigma. In 1979, NASA engineers analyzing the tilma with infrared technology discovered that the fabric lacks any preparatory sketches or brush strokes. The image seems to float directly on the surface as if projected. Even more baffling, the colors show no known animal, mineral, or plant-based pigments. Then there are the eyes. Under microscopic examination, ophthalmologists detected minute reflections in the Virgin's pupils' figures, matching the moment Juan Diego unfurled the tilma before the bishop. These Purkinje images, impossible to paint by hand at that scale, suggest a three-dimensional quality akin to a human retina capturing its surroundings. The tilma's weave, when magnified, reveals the image colors sitting atop the fibers without penetrating them, a technique beyond Renaissance artists' capabilities. Indigenous codices from the era note another eerie detail. The Virgin's sash indicates pregnancy in Aztec symbolism, her posture mirroring their fertility goddesses, a cultural bridge woven into the fabric itself. Whether divine intervention or an unsolved artistic marvel, the tilma's endurance speaks to something beyond pigment and fiber. In a land ravaged by conquest, this image became a unifying force, blending indigenous and Spanish traditions into a new identity. Science may never fully explain how the image appeared or why it persists, but perhaps that's the point. Some miracles exist not to be dissected, but to remind us that wonder, like Juan Diego's roses, can bloom in the most unexpected places. Deep in the sweltering jungles of Costa Rica's Diquis Delta, a mystery lies half buried in the red earth. Hundreds of perfectly spherical stone orbs, some as small as grapefruits, others towering taller than a grown man and weighing over 16 tons. Carved with impossible precision by the pre-Columbian Diquis people between 300 BCE and 1500 CE, these spheres display a geometric perfection that would challenge modern sculptors armed with laser tools. The most striking examples deviate less than 2 millimeters from a true sphere, a feat that begs the question: how did an ancient culture, working with stone hammers and abrasives, achieve such flawless symmetry without mathematical blueprints or advanced measuring devices? The Diquis left no written records, but their descendants, the Boruca people, preserve oral traditions that hint at otherworldly origins. They speak of Tara, the thunder god, who hurled these stone cannonballs from the heavens during cosmic battles, embedding them in the earth as markers of divine power. Modern archaeologists initially dismissed this as myth until they mapped the sphere's arrangements. At key sites like Finca Sixaiola, the orbs align with celestial events, forming straight lines that point to solstice sunrises or specific star positions. One cluster near the Rio Taroba mirrors the constellation Pleiades as it appeared during the rainy season, suggesting the spheres served as both calendar and celestial roadmap for agricultural rituals. Geologists studying the andesite and gabbro stones uncovered another layer of intrigue. The nearest quarries lie over 50 miles from where most spheres were placed, meaning the Diquis transported these massive objects through dense rainforest without wheels or draft animals. Some researchers propose they rolled them atop log rails, while indigenous lore insists the stones moved themselves when struck by moonlight. The surfaces, polished to a mirror-like sheen, show no chisel marks, only meticulous grinding with sand and water over generations. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was devotion, each sphere taking decades, perhaps lifetimes, to complete. Then there's the puzzle of their disruption. Many spheres were found deliberately toppled or smashed when Spanish conquistadors arrived, as if the Diquis sought to hide their purpose from invaders. Others were relocated in the 1930s by United Fruit Company workers who used them as lawn ornaments, erasing their original alignments. Today, only a handful remain in their primal configurations, their silent astronomy whispering secrets we're still piecing together. What lingers isn't just awe at their precision, but the haunting question of why. Were they boundary markers, astronomical calculators, or conduits for spiritual energy? The stones refuse to say. Like the silent orbs themselves, the truth remains perfectly formed and just out of reach. In the bustling relic markets of medieval Europe, where saints' bones and splinters of the true cross commanded reverence and revenue, few relics sparked as much fervor or awkwardness as the holy prepuce. At least 18 churches across the continent, from Chartres to Campigny, claim to possess the foreskin of Jesus Christ, each insisting their fragment was the one true sacred skin removed during his circumcision. The devout flocked to these shrines, convinced that veneration of this most intimate relic could cure infertility, protect in childbirth, or even, as one 12th century mystic claimed, release a burst of celestial perfume upon touch. The origins of these competing claims trace back to a theological quagmire. Early Christian texts debated whether Christ's resurrected body retained all earthly elements, foreskin included. By the 9th century, the Abbey of Charroux in France declared itself the custodian of the holy fragment, allegedly gifted by Charlemagne after an angel delivered it to him. Rival churches soon produced their own versions, often accompanied by elaborate backstories. One was said to have been brought from Jerusalem by a Crusader knight, another discovered floating inside a glowing reliquary on the Mediterranean. The Vatican, caught between piety and pragmatism, alternately tolerated and condemned the cult, with Pope Innocent Roman III in the 13th century discouraging speculation about the relic's authenticity, while stopping short of outright denial. Scientific scrutiny, had it existed then, might have raised eyebrows. Calculations suggest that if all claimed fragments were gathered, they'd amount to several foreskins, a biological impossibility. Yet belief persisted, fueled by the tangible power these relics wielded. Women unable to conceive would circle the shrine at coulombs, praying for the relic's intercession. Nobles donated fortunes to house the fragments in gem-encrusted casks. One in Antwerp was said to emit a golden glow on Easter morning. The prepuces even became political tools when Rome's Santissimo Sacramento Church displayed theirs in the 16th century. It was a defiant assertion of papal authority against Protestant reformers who mocked relic veneration as superstitious folly. Then came the thefts. Over centuries, the relics began vanishing, some looted during wars, others disappearing under suspicious circumstances. The most notorious heist occurred in 1983 when thieves broke into the Italian village of Calcutta, home to the last widely recognized holy prepuce, and stole it from its fortified altar. Local rumors swirled. Had the church secretly reclaimed it to avoid embarrassment? Had a collector paid for the ultimate clandestine artifact? The Vatican's response was telling. Instead of launching an investigation, they issued a decree forbidding any future veneration of the relic, effectively erasing it from Catholic practice. What lingers isn't just the absurdity of 18 holy foreskins, but what their cult reveals about medieval devotion, a world where faith clung to the physical, where divine power could reside in the humblest fragments of flesh. The missing prepuces of Europe stand as a paradox, simultaneously too sacred to discuss and too profitable to ignore. In the end, their disappearance feels almost poetic, a relic of a relic, a mystery wrapped in devotion, quietly withdrawn from a world that no longer knew how to believe in it. For 40 years, the Israelites wandered the desert, sustained by a miracle that fell from the sky, manna, the bread of angels, described in the book of Exodus as fine as frost, sweet like honey, and appearing with the morning dew. This mysterious substance kept an entire nation alive. But what if this divine provision wasn't supernatural at all? What if it was the product of an ancient machine hidden inside the Ark of the Covenant? This is the radical theory proposed by engineers George Sassoon and Rodney Dale in their 1978 book The Manna Machine. Drawing on obscure Jewish texts like the Zohar and Sefer Haggadah, they reconstructed a device they called the Ancient of Days, a self-contained bioreactor that cultivated edible algae. According to their interpretation, the Ark wasn't just a gold-plated chest. It was a sophisticated piece of technology housing a pair of rotating cylinders. One chamber grew a specific strain of algae, likely chlorella, a nutrient-dense microorganism, while the other processed it into a paste. The machine allegedly required daily maintenance, which Sassoon and Dale linked to the biblical instructions for gathering manna before it melted in the sun. Modern science lends eerie plausibility to this idea. During World War II, German scientists experimented with chlorella as a survival food, discovering its astonishing nutritional profile: proteins, vitamins, and minerals in near-perfect balance. NASA later revisited the concept for long-duration space missions, noting that chlorella can be cultivated in compact environments with minimal resources. Just add water and sunlight. The descriptions of manna's properties align uncannily with processed algae. When dried, it forms flakes resembling coriander seeds. When ground, it becomes a flour-like powder. Even its rapid spoilage matches chlorella's tendency to degrade without refrigeration. Ancient astronaut theorists take this further, suggesting the machine's origins were extraterrestrial. The Zohar describes the Ark emitting deadly sparks, interpreted by some as electrical discharges, perhaps a malfunctioning power source. The biblical account of individuals who mishandled the Ark dropping dead like Uzzah in 2 Samuel could hint at accidental electrocution. Meanwhile, the manna's sudden cessation once the Israelites reached Canaan might indicate the machine's fuel or culture medium was depleted, not divine caprice. Skeptics counter that few archaeological traces support such advanced technology in the Bronze Age, yet fragments of similar ideas appear cross-culturally. The Vedic soma, the Greek ambrosia, even the Mesopotamian bread of the gods all describe miraculous sustenance with mechanical undertones. The Egyptians, too, depicted their gods with rectangular, life chests reminiscent of the ark's dimensions. Whether myth, misunderstood technology, or something in between, the man-machine theory forces us to re-examine the past not as a linear progression from primitive to advanced, but as a tapestry where knowledge might have been lost as often as it was gained. After all, if our ancestors could envision, or even build, a device to transmute sunlight into food, what other marvels might have slipped through the cracks of history? The air in Bethany was thick with grief and the acrid scent of funeral spices when Jesus arrived 4 days after Lazarus's burial. According to the Gospel of John, the deceased man's sisters, Mary and Martha, greeted him with a mix of reproach and desperate hope. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." What followed would become one of the most dramatic miracles in the New Testament, a man dead long enough for decomposition to set in, emerging from his tomb at a single command, still wrapped in burial linens. But beneath the theological weight of this moment lies a tantalizing scientific question. Could Lazarus's death have been something else entirely? Medical historians point to a condition called catalepsy, a neurological disorder that mimics death with uncanny precision. Victims enter a trance-like state with rigid limbs, imperceptible breathing, and plummeting heart rates so profound that even physicians throughout history have mistakenly declared them deceased. Cases like the 19th century American poet Hannah Bisick, who was so terrified of premature burial she requested her corpse be periodically checked for signs of life, highlight how easily catalepsy could explain Lazarus's revival. The Gospels detail about the corpse's stench, often cited as proof of biological death, might reflect the sisters' assumptions rather than reality. In tropical climates, bacterial activity on a living but unconscious body could produce similar odors within hours, especially if Lazarus had succumbed to an infection or toxin before collapsing. Archaeology adds another layer to the puzzle. Excavations in Bethany, modern-day Al-Izariya, reveal 1st-century tombs carved into limestone, their rolling stones designed to seal tightly against scavengers. A reconstructed tomb near the traditional site of Lazarus's burial features a double-chambered design, allowing mourners to visit the deceased without fully reopening the crypt. This aligns with Martha's protest when Jesus ordered the stone removed. "By this time there will be a bad odor, for he has been dead 4 days." Her horror wasn't just spiritual, it was practical. Rotting corpses were ritually unclean, and the physical act of unsealing the tomb risked exposing the community to disease. Early Christian art captures the miracle's unsettling duality. 3rd-century catacomb frescoes in Rome depict Lazarus as a rigid, mummy-like figure, his bandages still clinging to his limbs as he steps forward. The Ravenna mosaics from the 6th century go further, showing Christ touching Lazarus with a wand-like staff, a detail some scholars interpret as a symbolic medical instrument, bridging divine power and healing. Even more telling are medieval manuscripts where Lazarus's resurrection is painted with a golden haze around his body, as if the artists couldn't decide whether they were portraying a corpse reanimated or a living man freed from a misdiagnosis. The tension between these interpretations raises a profound question. Does it diminish the miracle if Lazarus was never technically dead? Early Christian theologians like Origen argued that the point wasn't the mechanism, but the timing. Jesus' deliberate delay ensured no one could dismiss the event as a mere resuscitation. Modern parallels exist, like the case of a Tanzanian man in 2016 who woke in a morgue after doctors pronounced him dead from poisoning. His revival, like Lazarus's, became a local legend, blurring the lines between medical anomaly and the miraculous. Perhaps the real power of the Lazarus story lies in its refusal to fit neatly into any category. Whether divine intervention or a neurological marvel witnessed through ancient eyes, it forces us to confront the limits of both faith and science, and the haunting possibility that some truths transcend both. In the gilded halls of Constantinople's great palace, where Byzantine emperors held court beneath mosaics of Christ Pantocrator, there stood a chapel unlike any other, the Pharaoh's Chapel. This sacred vault housed the most coveted relics of Christendom, fragments of the true cross, the holy lance that pierced Jesus' side, even the crown of thorns pressed onto his brow. These weren't merely objects of veneration, they were the physical anchors of imperial power, believed to render Constantinople itself invincible. Pilgrims from across the medieval world whispered that the city's walls pulsed with divine energy, shielded by these very artifacts. But the year 1204 shattered that illusion, when Crusader armies, ostensibly bound for Jerusalem, sacked Constantinople during the Fourth Crusade. The relics became spoils of war. Knights ransacked the Pharaoh's Chapel, stuffing sacred fragments into saddlebags alongside gold and silks. The true cross was splintered into shards dispersed to churches from Paris to Venice. The Holy Lance allegedly found its way to Armenia, while the crown of thorns was pawned to Venetian merchants by the cash-struck Latin Emperor Baldwin II. Some relics vanished entirely, like the Virgin's robe, said to have been tossed into the Golden Horn by desperate clergy to prevent desecration. Centuries later, fragments of this sacred hoard began resurfacing in unexpected ways. In 1898, a team of Ottoman archaeologists renovating the Topkapi Palace stumbled upon a golden reliquary hidden behind a false wall. Inside lay what forensic experts later confirmed to be a segment of the true cross, its wood still bearing microscopic traces of olive oil consistent with ancient preservation methods. The Holy Lance took a darker path. A version housed in Vienna's Hofburg Palace was revealed in 2003 to be a 10th-century forgery, but researchers found iron particles matching 1st-century Roman metallurgy near its tip, suggesting it might have been authenticated by attaching it to an actual Roman spearhead. The most poignant survivor is the crown of thorns, now enshrined in Paris's Notre Dame. When fire ravaged the cathedral in 2019, firefighters formed a human chain to rescue it, a scene mirroring the desperate efforts of medieval monks. Modern analysis of the crown's rush fibers revealed pollen grains native to Jerusalem, while the absence of thorns long since gifted to other churches hints at its fractured journey from Byzantium to France. What makes these relics endure isn't just their spiritual weight, but their role as time capsules of devotion and violence. Each splinter of wood, each rusted nail carries layers of meaning, from the hands that revered them to those that looted them. They remind us that faith, like history, is rarely pristine. It's a tapestry woven with threads of gold and blood, its patterns visible only when we step back and dare to look. The night sky over Jerusalem in the year 7 BCE held a spectacle that would echo through millennia, a celestial dance so striking it might have guided mystics from distant lands to a humble birthplace. Modern astronomers, armed with planetarium software and ancient records, have reverse-engineered that long-vanished sky, revealing a rare confluence of events. In September of that year, Jupiter, the king planet in astrological tradition, entered a dazzling conjunction with Venus, the two brightest objects in the night sky merging into what would have appeared as a single pulsating beacon. Babylonian astrologers, whose meticulous clay tablets record planetary movements, noted this same configuration as an omen of royal births, but the celestial pageantry didn't stop there. By December, Jupiter entered retrograde motion near the star Regulus in Leo, a constellation associated with Judah in Jewish tradition. To observers tracking the heavens, this would have signaled kingship and divine favor. Then came the Piece de Resistance. In June of 6 BCE, Jupiter and Saturn converged 3 times in Pisces, a phenomenon so rare it occurs only once every 900 years. To Persian magi schooled in Zoroastrian astrology, This triple conjunction in the House of the Hebrews might well have signaled the rise of a messianic figure. Even Chinese astronomers recorded an unusual spark in 4 BCE, now believed to be a nova or comet flaring suddenly in Capricorn. Johannes Kepler, the father of planetary motion, became obsessed with these alignments. In 1604, after observing a supernova himself, he proposed that the Star of Bethlehem could have been a similar stellar explosion, a temporary beacon visible even in daylight. His calculations pointed to a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in 7 BCE as the likely trigger for the Magi's journey. Modern astrophysicists have identified remnants of such an event in the Kepler star, lending credence to his theory. Yet theological traditions resist reduction to mere astronomy. The Gospel of Matthew describes the star not just as a light, but as a guide moving ahead of the Magi before stopping over Bethlehem. Some scholars argue for a miraculous Shekinah, the divine luminous presence described in Exodus. Others note parallels to the ancient Jewish concept of the Messiah's birth being heralded by a star out of Jacob, as foretold in the Book of Numbers. What emerges isn't a contradiction, but a layered mystery. Whether the Magi followed a predictable planetary alignment or a singular supernatural event, their journey speaks to humanity's eternal impulse to seek meaning in the stars. The night sky, after all, is the one scripture read by all cultures, a tapestry where science and wonder share the same constellations. Perhaps the Star of Bethlehem's greatest lesson is that some lights shine brightest when viewed through both telescopes and tails. Across these 35 stories, from the trembling stones of racetrack Playa to the incorruptible bodies of saints, from celestial omens etched in ancient skies to the undulating flames of the holy fire, one pattern emerges again and again, the human longing to touch the intangible. Whether through relics that bleed, statues that weep, or artifacts that defy their era's technological limits, we're drawn to moments where the sacred leaves a fingerprint on the physical world. But here's the thrilling tension at the heart of these mysteries. They live in the liminal space between faith and fact. The same burning bush that inspired Moses can be analyzed as a rare desert plant, yet its voice still echoes across millennia. The Shroud of Turin bears the scars of radiocarbon dating, but its ghostly image remains stubbornly irreducible to pigments or physics. Even the most skeptical among us must pause when faced with the sheer weight of witnesses at Fátima, or the precision of a 2,000-year-old astrolabe like the Antikythera mechanism. These aren't just ancient yarns, they're invitations to wrestle with a fundamental question. When does the unexplainable become the miraculous? Perhaps what unites these stories isn't definitive proof of the divine, but something even more profound: their power to humble us. The universe, as it turns out, is far stranger than our textbooks dare to admit. Whether you interpret the dancing plague of Strasbourg as mass hysteria or divine chastisement, whether you see the Ark of the Covenant as a lost artifact or a metaphysical conduit, these wonders remind us that history's most enduring mysteries are the ones that refuse to fit neatly into categories. So where does that leave us? Not with answers, but with better questions. Maybe the real magic lies in the act of seeking itself, in the collective awe that arises when pilgrims gather under the spinning sun at Medjugorje, or when scientists and shamans alike stare into the void of the Bagong pipes and see reflections of their own curiosity. As you reflect on these 35 wonders, consider which one lingers in your mind like an unsolved equation. Was it the child's laughter echoing through the miracle of Calanda, or the silent defiance of the hanging pillar at Lepakshi? The choice is yours, and that's the point, because in the end, these stories aren't just about what happened. They're about what happens next, the conversations, the debates, the quiet moments when we all glance at the stars and wonder. The comment section, as always, is open. Let's keep the